back to Deep Thoughts, ladies and gentlemen. On this cool evening, it is August 1st. It's about 12:30 in the morning. So today, we're going to talk about souls. And I think the title I'm going to use is Swimming Souls. A little provocative. You know, we've talked about souls. I got an episode on souls. And if you were to say that the way, at least in America, I don't know if it's this way in other countries, but when we put you in a level 1 college class, they typically call it a 101 class, right? Psychology 101, French 101, whatever. And then it goes 202, 301. This would be a higher level soul conversation. So if you're into this kind of thing, and it's going to get at what we are, it's going to get into consciousness, it's going to get into an ecosystem of souls. So a friend of mine, very brilliant person, writer, director, he told me this story, and if those of you who've listened to every single episode, way back in your brain, you've heard this story once before. Only once. I'm pretty sure only once. I dare anyone to prove different. But what he told me was, he was actually telling a whole room, but he realized I was the only person still listening. And he said that he got in a boat somehow, I think off the coast of Florida. And I think he said he was either hallucinating because he was out there for so long, he almost drifted out and died. But I don't know if he was using any drugs. He's not a heavy drug user or anything. This is way back in, I think the 70s when he was younger. I don't know if it was before he got married or what the deal was, but he told me a story that at one point he hallucinated that just like how fish, like how dolphins do their migrations in the ocean and they just all are going together, right? They're jumping out and diving in and jumping out. There's a really big sine cosine wave coming in and out of literally the water realm into the air realm, the oxygen realm. That he saw an infinite funnel or tube of souls jumping in and out of the ocean. His impression is that they were very content and happy and that this was a positive thing. But he said to me, because he's telling this story and I think people are not deep enough to get what he's saying, so it's his house and everyone's moving around at a party he was having. And he finally turns to me, and I hadn't really met the guy yet. I was a fan of his work, and he just looks at me and he says a dirty word. I'll put it in an acronym for you. He said, "We don't leave this place, MFers." And I was like, whoa, that is totally trippy. Coming from this guy, I thought, man, this dude really, really, really has a huge grasp on potential realities and potential interpretations of consciousness. He's very famous for writing about that kind of thing. And so that story just is stuck with me because it's so visual. He's a visual person. He writes screenplays, and he directs films. So it's like you see these things, right? I thought he did a great job. So, we've talked about consciousness and souls and God and just, the matrix versus 10 different shapes the world might be. And again, this is going to be a conversation way, way beyond any geometry of where we are, okay? We've toyed with the notion that we are God. We are all one big giant being that is simply spread out. And this world is our temporary existence simply to get through infinity. You have to forget who you were, and you have to be reborn, and you have to re-experience the limited amount of stuff that there is to experience. As much as we might be able to mathematically conceive of a bunch of different experiences, I don't know. What do we experience in this world? When you write screenplays, there's how there's a color wheel, and the color wheel is one of the most brilliant things for artists, because the color on the other side of the wheel is complementary to the color you started with. As long as you just drive it a line right through the center from the color that you're on, the one you hit goes really well with the one that you picked. So like gold and blue will be across from each other. It is brilliant how that thing was put together. But there's an emotional wheel that is also created for screenwriting, where it's good and evil and happiness and sadness and all these different things. And then there's another ring outside of that for the deeper scripts that starts to go to the more subtle things like indifference, or perhaps empathy is on the outer ring. It certainly feels like it is today. It's not a prime color of emotional experience these days. But I struggle with this notion of, okay, we're here now. Where the hell did we come from? Chicken and egg. Where did we come from? To us, there are things that aren't alive and things that are alive. Things that are alive typically get, depending on if they look a lot like us, we start to consider them to have the attributes that we have, the machinery that we have. And I'll give you an example. Those of you who have dogs and cats that you're very fond of, or you've had them in your lifetime, you'll swear they have a soul. A person without pets will say, no, they definitely don't have souls. Why would they have souls? They're not human. They're not good enough to have a soul. I mean, I've heard people say that in my lifetime. It's so silly. But then you ask yourself, does a cow have one? Does a coyote have one? Does a bear have one? Does that fish, who doesn't seem to do much, but just look at, just do a little drinking, breathing exercise and grabs a piece of fish, does that thing have a soul? We tend to think that souls have this extra level of consciousness, this ability to desire to communicate. A dog communicates, a cat communicates. I mean, it really, really communicates. But then you see a swan on the edge of a riverbank feeding fish, taking something and feeding fish. There's the swan that walks around on the internet and cleans up this garden. I don't know where this came from. I don't think you have pet swans. It just happened to show up. And they're both black swans, I believe. But the thing would just go around and pick up anything that didn't look normal and move it to a place and get rid of it and never use it for a nest or anything. It's manicuring a garden as if some incredible Japanese garden or like a Mexican gardener where these guys just have this meticulous nature. I mean, it doesn't have to be a particular race, but those are two races that are very famous for just botany, just beautiful creations, right? And so you wonder, is that a human being that went into a swan? Is it a punishment that they're now trying to make better? I'm going to feed the fish, I'm going to clean up the garden, and eventually I'll earn my keep back into a human body. Who knows, right? But the interesting thing is that the maximum ecosystem of organized religion is that your soul comes out of somewhere. God gives it to you. God makes you out of thin air, like you don't exist, and he takes red Play-Doh and some silly putty and a paper clip, and he MacGyvers you together and then sticks you into your mother's womb. If you're lucky enough to be born, Planned Parenthood doesn't get a hold of you first. You're born, and then you live, and then you die. And then the traditional Christian religion, you go up to these pearly gates because heaven has a wall, and you got to talk to this dude with the big ass book, and he reviews your life. And if you do well enough, you go into the pearly gates. And if you mess up just a little bit, then you're fire and brimstone forever. Crazy, right? So that's the ecosystem of a soul. It is created, used once, and goes up to heaven and stays there forever. And God knows what you do in heaven forever. Right? I couldn't give you, as a human being, a definition of heaven that I could personally deal with forever. And a lot of people just say, well, it's just heaven, man. It's all figured out. Don't even worry about it. I'm not worried about it, okay? I'm just thinking about it, that's all. But there's that whole thing of as it is above, so too it is below. Maybe that applies to a spiritual realm. It just seems that for things to exist, there's an ecosystem. Here on Earth, if things don't have eyeballs and legs, regardless if they're fish or amoeba that seem to move around a little bit, but like a plant, there's certain folks, I think my plants are totally alive and conscious, completely. I know they're conscious. I mean, that's been proven, but I think they know me, and I think they know that I love them, and I think that's why they feel loved, and this is a giant give and take. I sit in the bosom of all these beautiful plants, and they serenade me, and I hopefully serenade them. It's a beautiful ecosystem. When you get around someone that you love, especially another human being, boy, you're built for each other. You really are. And so you harmonize between the two of you, and magic can happen. You look at all the great teams that have made things, science teams, like two people together create something great. Musicians and artists and couples and et cetera, et cetera. It's magic, isn't it? We've got plenty of proof that that's the case. But now here on Earth, what's interesting about it is that our soul, if you're a Christian, and I'm not trying to pick on Christianity, but I just want to give you that example. It's the religion I know the most about. It's a one-way trip. It just goes born, die, heaven. If all goes well. Born, die, hell, if everything goes bad. Or enough goes bad, right? So it's just one line. It's a two-dimensional line. It's X, Y to XY. Maybe Z if you think heaven's up and hell's down. All right. But now what happens to our body here on Earth? Ashes to ashes and dust to dust. We go into the ground, and eventually we're swallowed up by the earth. It happens. A casket will eventually deteriorate. Your body cells will be reincarnated in the fact that it will become another thing. Think about the fact that, it's potential that you contain pieces and parts of other things that used to be. You eat food, don't you? Well, if I eat a cow and I become strong and I get big muscles because I work out, then I've got sort of like the pieces and parts of cow in me. It's just teeny tiny. If I eat a bunch of plants, well, they're conscious too, and I'm becoming part of the plant protein. Okay. So we see a recycled ecosystem down at our level. But when it goes to the soul, it's a one-way trip. Boom. Over. Other cultures believe in reincarnation. The Dalai Lama is a reincarnated soul, according to their religion. Every religion that endorses karma has to believe in reincarnation because that's the punishment. Be good. And what's interesting about it, reincarnation, religions as it pertains to your soul and sort of your scorecard of your soul, is that you get infinite chances to get yourself cleaned up. It never ends. It never ends. You're supposed to hone yourself over infinity. Now, it's hard for us as human beings to say, okay, well, you're going to be human 10,000 times, and then you're going to reach the sort of like this Buddhist enlightenment, and then you get to go off to another whole realm of existence. It's still your soul. The soul is the one thing that doesn't need a form. It takes form. It, maybe is a symbiotic relationship with whatever physical form. Whether you turn into pure light, light is still a verb of ethereal winds, and so you still need to write it with your consciousness. Okay. We're so worried about the chicken and the egg, right? Because we're born and we live and we die. There's a start and there's a middle and there's an end. If nothing else, there's just at least a start and an end that we're concerned about. We default to, people like me default to reincarnation because you can't hide energy in the world, in the universe. You can't. I couldn't hide anything on this patio from the universe, as far as I know. Even with the most existential, mathematical, multidimensional models, and I can say, well, I'm going to push this, microphone stand into another dimension of reality, another quantum reality. It's going to vibrate out of existence here, and it goes, well, it still exists. It's just in a different universe. Okay. What do you care where your soul is as long as it's not in some sort of painful situation? Can a soul by itself feel pain? Seems interesting. What is the definition of pain? Maybe not. Maybe. We feel physical pain all the time, but it just depends on how severe the physical pain is. I've never lost a limb or been on fire at any point in my lifetime. So the idea is the things that hurt me the most that I can think of are emotional things. Sometimes it's the sweetest thing in the world. You're in love with somebody and you can't be with them right now. It doesn't matter. You're going to be with them at 6 o'clock at night, but you're so, just gobsmacking love. You just want to be with them all the time. You love your child, and your child's got to be set free to live their own life. You don't want to be on them too much because they have to make their own decisions. And every time you see them, you say you love them and you trust them. If they need anything, you're always there and you check in on them. But, only some kids like their parents to be on them 24/7. I'm not one of those kids. I didn't have access to my parents when I was a child, so I certainly don't have a manifestation need for that today. And I kind of like that. That way, if we share time, it's very clean. But the swimming soul would be sort of what my friend saw. He thought that the vision that he saw, and who knows if he's right or wrong, that meant that we didn't leave Earth, that we just stay here. And he didn't say that we were trapped. He just said we don't leave. And, if that's the case, if Earth is one of those celestial creations that is truly special in the eyes of God, or it is for some reason the only thing that we can actually attach ourselves to or be around, perhaps the moon is a dead object and there's nothing to be on the moon because nothing lives on the moon. There's no bacteria, there's no plant life, there's no animal life, and so we can't go there because there's nothing. We can go, but we would just be pure soul looking at something if we have eyes or some way to sense something. But because here we have actual vessels we can push ourselves through. The teeniest, tiniest little insect all the way up to the most mammoth creature that's ever walked the earth. Interesting. An ecosystem. Doesn't really explain where we come from. People who take DMT, they often will tell you that their impression of what they see is flying to the center of the universe, meeting God, and on the way, just seeing fun-loving, almost dream-like light interpretations of life. One person told me it was like seeing butterflies made of light. And they're at least in two or more in a group, and they're flying around, having a good time. Well, that's interesting. You ever get the willies when you think about, swimming into the deep bowels of the ocean? How a whale does it, or how some of these deep diving animals, to them, it's just their realm. It's a 3D realm of water, and they go down. I don't know how far you have to go down before you don't have any light, but I would imagine it's not as far down as we think it is. But you wouldn't see any light. Now you're just swimming in blackness. So you have to have eyeballs that are gonna sense things, because a whale could easily just swim right into a reef, right into a ground, right into a cliff, swim into another whale. Obviously they don't go that deep, but there's fish down on the bottom of the ocean just chilling out. Some fish have illuminated bodies. How alien and funky is that? It's just wild, man. I think what's interesting about this question of who we are and who made us and what made us and how we sustain ourselves is that because we can't develop a paradigm to even begin to answer the question, we are left with this void of almost... it's almost the frustration of someone withholding an answer that you want. They've got it. And they just won't tell you because they're just not going to tell you. Maybe they're a jerk. Maybe it's a bad piece of information for you to have. It'll undo your own life. It'll make you hate your life. So you say, no, it's better you don't know. It's almost like one of those things of the old question, if you had a earth-killing meteorite coming at us and it's going to hit on a particular day, they figured the whole thing out and they're like, they did all the mathematical models, there's no way to avoid it. And they just say, well, let's have a party with all the money on earth. We got 6 months left. We're just going to stop taxes. We're going to just have a gigantic party before it's all over. Not tell a soul. Just let everyone have a good time, because we're all going to punch out at the same time. That's probably better, right? It's probably better that we go out that way. It makes you wonder if they ever would do that, right? Again, I'm not convinced that things exist that fall from space that are what we think they are, because the entire time I've been alive, we've never had one crater created on Earth as it appears on the moon, as it appears in Arizona. Never, not once. Seems kind of weird, wouldn't it? 100 million, supposedly, rocks from outer space hit the atmosphere per minute. Now, they're teeny tiny particles and teeny tiny rocks. I've seen plenty of shooting stars, what they used to call falling stars. There's a tiny digression on that. Remember, about 2 years ago, NASA was saying that some of the stars seem to be disappearing out of the sky. Really? I think I even posted that up a long time ago on the Facebook page, because we were seeing the falling orbs from space, which sometimes look really, really man-made and sometimes don't. And again, David's been filming all these stars with these, plasma bands on them, and it's the most bizarre thing. It seems like the stars are light bulbs up there with just plasma zooming around the outside. So we're trying to figure out who God is all the time. At least those of us who ask the question. And I always feel like, I write mystery when I can. If I write a movie, I write mystery into it. And mysteries have clues, and it's in screenwriting, it's called cluing. And how does it work? You find a little tidbit of something, and then it leads to the next clue, the next clue, the next clue, until you find out what's really going on, and then you have the main character deal with it and conquer his or her obstacle, thus creating a comedy, which is not funny. It just means that they overcame their obstacle. Okay. So we're down here on Earth. We only have certain sets of information, certain faculty to discern that information. We have to be enlightened. We have to enlighten each other so that we can see more. And then hopefully we find that little thread that's sticking out of the sweater, and we pull it enough that we finally find out what's going on. Now, there's a lot of you, along with me, we all believe that everything we've ever wanted to know about the universe is here. It's not here as an object on the patio with me. It is accessible once you focus your mind. And again, like I've said in several episodes, you have to write the database query to get the information back to you. What's fascinating for me is that so many things that I have researched and then just sat around and thought about and then wrote down, most of them now are just episodes. I'm now finding ethereal theories all over the place, where when I said it, I felt crazy, and now there's like articles written about it. And it's like, wow, I just did a episode on Coral Castle, which probably will have aired before this episode in season 5. And I'm talking about how it's all ethereal based. And then I found another article about the magnetic wheel thing that he created, and it's all ether based in the article. And I'm sitting there going, unbelievable. Everyone's having the same epiphany. Now, no one has talked about the quantum locking that I talked about to move the blocks that I know of, but it's interesting that we're all sort of delving into the same pool of information, as Philip K. Dick called it, the river of knowledge. It's around you constantly. Well, imagine my friend's river of souls. Well, souls would have tremendous amounts of access to the universe, right? Because it is what I believe to be the sort of quantum force of consciousness. Quantum just simply meaning a unit. A unit of soul is what you are. A unit of soul is what I am. We are all connected. We are. I really believe that our souls are... It's sort of like... okay, I'll give you a perfect example, an analogy of how I think our souls might be working. I have some lights. I don't ever turn them on, but they're little round 2-inch light bulbs. Put them up during a Christmas one time. But think about Christmas lights on a Christmas tree. Okay. So they're cute little light bulbs. Look, they're molded to look like little tiny candles. And how does it work? They're all pinched into a big line of voltage. You plug them into the wall, and it screams down the wire and lights up every individual light bulb. Okay, so we have one source of energy from the wall, but if you really think about it, they distinctly represent themselves as bulbs. And one could, in there, if you had a bunch of colored light bulbs, you could say, this is a little red guy, and he's got his own little personality, and here's a little blue one, he has his own little personality. But underneath the bulb is the stream of electricity that's enabling them to exist. It crawls up a little wire, boils a little filament, comes back down. It doesn't boil, but you know what I'm saying. The friction makes it light up. Amazing. You can touch it with your finger, but if you were to touch the filament inside, you'd burn yourself 3rd degree, because it's about 1,000 degrees, as I'm told. Could that simple analogy, that simple example, be how all the souls in the universe work? It's just like ether, which is kind of a big bowl of water that holds the universe together. It is the universe. It is the universe. I always wondered why the sun made me feel so good. And how in the summertime, like it is right now, it's very, you tend to be more positive in the summertime. Now, some people love winter. I'm not saying that winter isn't beautiful if you live in certain places, but in California, it doesn't snow here. So it just gets cold. And we think about what it was like when it was warm. And we got a beach you really can't do much on because it's cold. The ocean gets down to really freezing temperatures. Not freezing, but you wouldn't want to put your feet in it for more than a few minutes. So when I realized that I think we're made out of ether, being in the sun is like imperative. Your pituitary gland that exudes vitamin D to keep you healthy. Very important. People who sit inside too much get sick more often. That's why when we see people with tan skin, the genetics of a man/mankind, right? We think they're more healthy. We're attracted to them more. Now, of course, there's places in the world where the women never ever get any sun, and that's what it's part of their culture. Okay. Maybe their genetics are more reinforced. Maybe they have a more natural flow of vitamin D without any sun. Perhaps. Like I said, go look up Russian kids being toured through tanning rooms to keep them healthy. I felt this one little picture, a bunch of little kids in their undies. Don't get excited, Podesta. And they all have their little, tanning goggles on. And they're all just sitting there and standing there real proud, And the article said something like they get exposed to 15 minutes of this thing once a day to keep them healthy. It was cute. It was like, oh, wow, they really figured out you do need sun. We moved out of the equator where we were conceived, most likely, up to these northern hemisphere regions where man was not necessarily designed to exist. And we had to mechanically compensate for what we're losing. Okay, so let's keep the analogies flowing here. Swimming souls. If swimming souls is nothing more than a bad choice of words for me to talk about the ecosystem of souls, well, let's think about ethereal ecosystems in our solar system. The sun is a plasma ball. It is ether that is slowed down enough to be seen, let's just say, but not slow enough to turn into anything that we designate as an element or an atomic property, a quark of any kind. It is still moving too quickly. And it has this plume, this 3D plume that comes out of the sun, it comes out of the earth, it comes out of the moon. Anything that's a celestial body in space will have this, and we call them the Van Allen belts around Earth, right? Well, think about if you were an ethereal particle that had consciousness, you're trying to make out what you are, but your birthing point is somewhere on the outside of the sun, and it's a big belt. You're really way out there in the solar system. Well, because of the way everything bumps into itself and creates a gravity field, the gravity push of ether, you're going to go back into the bowels of the sun at some time. Now, what if it's not ether, it's souls? Okay, so what would be the big thing we'd be going back into at some point in our journey? Could be God. Could be the greatest concentration of what it is that makes us up. Okay, well, think about it this way. I think it's fairly safe to say that if an ether particle, heliocentric model, is coming out of the sun and happens to hit Earth at the right angle, it actually gets in an Earth orbit and starts going inside the Earth. And maybe it sticks inside the bowels of the Earth and inflates it for expanding Earth, or maybe it just joins the Van Allen belt cycle. So then you would change entire universes sort of in your mind. I was a sun particle, now I'm an Earth particle. And later on, I'm a moon particle. If this place gets obliterated by something resets everything, then you're whatever and wherever that is. Let's say we really are in a spiral galaxy. Let's say the Milky Way is really that, which I'm not convinced. Okay. Then we just keep shifting, moving around. It's infinite. But then we have this issue of things observed seem to change. Now, for those of you who caught my episode on, the whole thing about why people see us, stare or feel us staring at them, a human being existing in a room changes the entire atomic property of the room. It does, because a hell of a lot more is happening than is being registered, especially on an ethereal level. If I move my hand up, I'm changing everything. Not only just the light reflection off my hand, but all the ethereal particles that are making up my hand are splashing everywhere. It's the whole biophoton episode I did. So we think that physics changes when human beings observe things. Well, our eyeballs, I think, are giant projectile, laser beams of ether. It's a concave divot in my skull, which is catching all the ether and bouncing it straight out. So wherever I'm looking, I'm projecting more and more ether at that thing. So if I'm observing a laser, I could change a laser's behavior simply because I'm existing. Okay. So I think the second logical question along the lines of what we're talking about here is that we want to believe that inanimate matter, such as like ether, it is merely constrained by its collisions, and that, atoms exist because of 3D space particles dense enough to be present in generally most places that we would exist, right? I still think that on a certain, microscopic level, we start seeing giant chasms between ethereal particles, but we just cut that out because we're not trying to look down beyond existence on that level. We go up to the quantum level of a ethereal particle, and then we're seeing all reality, and we're seeing just a whole, just like blood going through an artery, just boom, boom, boom. You see them collide all the time. What's going on in the river is going on inside your arteries. The tree branches look like your lung arteries, it's all the same thing, man. It's all the same forces, and it does not drastically change simply because you give it a different name. But what we probably want to believe, maybe it's the case, because there's this other word that gets into the soul problem, the soul equation, the soul question. Let's say you bought some of the stuff I just told you about an ecosystem of souls. We still want to believe, and I'm not going to disappoint here, we want to believe that there's a mechanism, a logical paradigm of mechanism to create things. Creation. We create things here on Earth. I'm creating this episode right now. I am shaping light, I'm shaping sound, and then Pavlovianly in your mind, as you hear my voice, it is shaping the way you feel. Perhaps you're getting tired, So we want to believe that the soul layer of our existence, the consciousness layer, which is really probably all souls are, is the consciousness of the universe. That we, irrespective of ethereal dictation, we do control what we are, when we are, how we are, etc., etc. Now, what's interesting about being born into any one vessel, where you essentially surrender the freedom of being consciousness out there in the universe, right? Maybe in consciousness in the universe, we can be a bunch of different things. We're just in a constant dream state, for all we know. Now, what you would dream of would be very interesting if you were pure soul, because you're not in a body anymore. Do you still dream of being human? Do you dream of something else? Again, I had a dream where I woke up in the dream and I was a tree. And it was just trees. And there was this green mist towards the bottom. And the other trees told me, I woke up and I said, oh my God, I'm actually a tree. And the other trees said, yeah, we're all trees. I said, what was I dreaming of? And they said, you're dreaming of not being a tree. And I was like, wow. And it was sort of this insinuation, this rhetorical insinuation from the other trees that we don't have arms and legs and we can't walk around and we are stuck here for an eternity. So of course we dream of being human. What else would we do? Just be a tree? And it's interesting because I had eyes. I didn't have eyeballs necessarily, but I was a tree trunk looking down on myself, and I was looking around, and it was just a perfectly planted landscape of trees. It actually went down from where I was, and there was soil, and there was other trees, and there's no buildings, there's no civilization outside of trees. It was interesting. But don't we want to believe that we can craft things? And I think that once we surrender ourselves to a particular body of any life, we then have to adopt its paradigm potential, which is to say, if you're a plant, can you dream of being a human being? If you can't walk, can you dream of walking? Could you make yourself walk? I mean, if any of you have seen time-lapse photography of plants, reaching out to water, reaching out to sun, it seems very conscious. I mean, and people can say it's all mechanical because, it's getting sun on one side, so the photosynthesis is working, and so that part of the plant grows more in that direction. Hey, maybe that's true. Not sure. I just want to take a break here and say, I've been recording on my patio now for 4 years, and I've done it at night several times, and in the last 2 months, this backyard is alive. I mean, the amount of animals I have jumping around, it is off the chain. And I can't even see them. Just behind the camera there, one of the branches, it's at least 8 feet off the ground, just started shaking like crazy because there's something up there. 2 animals are fighting back there in the bush. I got one crawling over here. Possums, raccoons, little tiny rats. Rats love palm seeds. It's interesting. I think we tend to believe that we can't be certain things because as human beings, we can definitely conceive of being different things and we can't find a way to make it happen. Lots of human beings, almost all modern Western world human beings have conceived of flying. Just doing it because, just like Superman. All right, I have not seen a human being fly in my lifetime. I don't think it's a matter of just believing that you could fly because we'd have some crazy people. I mean, the feral homeless of the world that are, losing their mind because they're malnutritioned. You think they start flying because they can't conceive of what they can't do. I mean, it's just they're kind of out there in their strange realms. Sane asylums would be full of all kinds of superhumans because they would believe they could do a lot of things that they can't do. But I do think that there's a margin of things that we're yet to discover as human beings that is definitely within our spectrum. I don't know if we need to actually modify our proteins and our brain patterns to pull it off. I don't know. I guess the biggest question is, do we need to? And maybe if we contributed to the overall design of the universe through being this consciousness force that's perfectly blended in and coexisting with ether, then everything that we've created is either a logical shape, like a round planet, which is what ether would do, create everything to be round. And it's just, a small round thing would be called a rock, and a big round thing might be called a planet, and a super big round thing that's on fire because it it constantly combusts due to just sheer impact because it's so large. It may be a sun, aka star. Don't know. Haven't you experienced, either directly or indirectly, someone who believed in their dream and they went for their dream and they got it? Through every trial and tribulation, they got it. Because when they failed, they just picked themselves back up and kept going. And then you've seen folks, and we've all done this too, we've had dreams where we gave up. We were too young to know that we should have kept going. We didn't prioritize it in our life. Some other fun but short-term thing was happening, and so we gave up the long-term goal for the short-term goal. Later regretted it. And that might be one of the very basis consciousness decisions / mechanisms / limitations or enablers for us to get what we want. But now imagine, let's say that within the human vessel, there are X number of things we haven't accomplished yet because we believe a paradigm that we can't, even though the designers of the human body, the Homo sapiens sapiens species, fully embedded in the human species these other things that we haven't done yet. Maybe telekinetics. We can move things with our mind. Maybe communicating without words, ESP. Seeing ghosts, whatever it is. All these different things, seeing different frequencies. Okay. But now, what if you pop out of your body and you join the architects of the universe? You've always been one of these slices of consciousness, because the universe, if it is truly electricity that's lighting up individual bulbs in a string of Christmas lights, you are everything, as well as maybe for a moment, a bulb. You're the whole power source, and you're the bulb. As I said in the staring episode, ether might be providing for this realm of existence the medium by which it's really the barrel of the gun, and your soul is the bullet. As you shoot out, you're carrying the form that is the bullet, what you are. And you fly out and you can land in another location, and you have brought your information of what you are, your form, your being, everything you've learned, to the other location. And if it's splashes and influences via frequencies, right? Frequencies tend to influence other frequencies. You know, it's the old Night at the Roxbury SNL skit where Chris Kattan and Will Ferrell are banging back and forth dancing, and then someone gets between them and they start shaking them, and they are now dancing into the same exact rhythm as these two guys. Maybe it's on a backbeat where they're getting beat up, but that's what happens. All these mechanics that have tried to, and successfully, controlled the mind, machines that control your mind. You know, they put the little solenoid inside of a little circuit inside of a bull's brain, right on top of the bull's brain. And so the bull comes charging at you, and they pop it, and the bull can't think anymore. And it starts to kind of, it's really just going through convulsions as the brain has been overloaded. It's a very crude example. But that exact technique was modified over probably half a century, maybe even 70 years at this point. And that's how they know they can beam a frequency at your brain, and you're going to have an obtuse set of emotions. You're going to feel afraid. You're going to feel comforted, whatever, in love, mad, whatever. They can do it to you. The mapping of the brain that's gone on now, where people can now dictate words just by thinking about them. And so one of the most powerful dictation technologies they're trying to pioneer at this point is when you think of a word, there's a lot of subconscious patterns inside your brain, electrical patterns in a very three-dimensional array in your brain start to conceive of the word, and then you start to conceive of saying the word. There's an image of the word in your mind, and they have, through very mechanical brute force techniques, probably big machine learning as well, have figured out this configuration in the brain happens when you want to say the word watermelon. This happens when you want to say the word dolphin. And so it writes it into the computer, and you think the thing's reading your mind. And it sort of is. It's not doing it in any spiritual way. It's doing it in a very mechanical way. All right. The other thing I always ask myself is, if you met a human being who was immortal and they had lived 1,000 years, and you have a conversation with them about your life, your trials and tribulations of life, and they're looking at you having lived God knows how many lives. It would be minimum of 10 lives, right? Because they would have lived 100 years 10 times, and that would get you to 1,000. But let's just say they lived the average, so maybe they lived 15 lives. And they've been married and divorced, and they've had kids, and they've had no kids. They've been a woman, they've been a man. They wouldn't have been a woman or man. But they have, maybe, who knows, but they didn't actually reincarnate. But that conversation would be very interesting because their wisdom would be powerful, super duper powerful, if they remembered the 10 or 1,000 years that they lived. But now take that up to 10,000. What kind of person would be, what would a person sound like who has lived 10,000 years? Wouldn't that be amazing to have that conversation? I mean, maybe it'd be the driest conversation you've ever had in your life. But talk about taking someone's advice, right? If you go see a psychiatrist and talk out things with the psychiatrist, well, you're looking at a mortal human being who's going to have no more years of life than you, provided you both take care of your bodies and you have good genetics. They just have focused their minds on studying the human condition. They've listened to hopefully hundreds of, if not thousands of patients before you brought in your issues. So you tend to trust them because they've seen these patterns over and over and over again. So what would be the pattern recognition of someone 1,000 years old and 10,000 years old? The reason why I mention that is that think about the life cycle of a soul. What do they care about? What do we care about once we leave the human vessel? Are we terribly concerned with pain and suffering and death? I don't know. I tend to think, as much as it pains my heart in one perspective, they don't. Because they're like, don't worry about it. You're going to be reborn. Doesn't matter if you die at 1 month old or 110 or 200 years old. You're going to live again because you can't stop. And if their pure form of existence, our pure form of existence, as a pure soul, is painless, wonderful, it's almost like being in the best toy store in the universe. You can play with toys and be entertained. You can create toys if you get bored. You can take two toys and push them together. And then there's the big giant question of what matters when you're a pure form. I've really been thinking about people's, near-death experiences where they died. Technically, their body died. They floated away from their bodies. They had these experiences. Every single one of them have said, it's painless. It's wonderful. All those little aches and pains you had in your body that you just grew to, tolerate, gone. And then when they come back to their bodies because something traumatic happened to them that made them die, they're back in their body and they're kind of grumpy because they're like, oh God, I got to wake up in this thing again. If someone got in a major accident, they might wake up in a tremendous amount of physical pain, having just recently touched that other realm of no pain, of maybe a feeling of all knowledge, but by the time they get back to the body, just like a dream, it floats away because you're not supposed to have that information when you're in your body. It's designed not to be able to hold the answer to the universe, life, the universe and everything, which is only 42, so I don't know what the problem is. What I have found, and you know what, you have to understand, like, before I started this show, I don't think I'd put much thought into reincarnation at all. It was through doing the shows and doing episodes that I was like, oh yeah, we do. I just feel like we do. We absolutely reincarnate. What that means and where we go and what we turn into, I don't think it's exclusively human at all. Maybe it is. But then how does a dog get a soul? How do some animals just act human? It's interesting. I swear to God, I have spiders, little house spiders, little jumping spiders, right? When they're teeny tiny, and that one guy has the 3D jumping spider as his main character on YouTube. But guys make gobs of money off this thing. They do. They usually hang out on my sink in my bathroom or whatever. It's like once every 6 months. And they turn around and look at you, And if you reach over for the soap, they turn and watch your hand grab the soap, and they turn around, and if you kind of come close to them, just like that animated character on YouTube, they just hop away from you like, oh, don't hurt me. I got this instinct. I think you're going to kill me. You're bigger than me, and I just got born, and I'm not taking any chances on my life. I want to live. And isn't it interesting that all things want to live? Isn't it interesting how many times you try to swat a fly, and he just goes, oh, sure, no problem. I'll sit right here while you whack me with that thing. Nope, even if you get them, they're trying to live. Spiders, they're hilarious, man. You touch a spider, other than like black widows that are like, I will fuck you up, right? They come right at you. But they're coming at you because they want to fight and get rid of you. I had this story right where I'm sitting. Yeah, when I first moved here 16 years ago, I had a hibachi grill it was the only thing I could have in my apartment complex before I moved here. And I left it out here for a few months, and a black widow got up in there. Big mama. Probably easily 2.5 inches across. If I were to flatten her out, she'd probably be damn near 3 inches. Big old red spot on her back. And I opened this thing up because I was going to use it for the first time, and there she is. And so I was like, okay, I need to use this. Like, I guess coming over, I'm going to do this thing. So I walked out in the center of that yard back there behind me, and I shook her out. This chick came after me with a vengeance. I turned, and she bit me. She would have left a mark and probably would have made me sick, right? She was so huge. But no matter where I went in the yard, she would follow me. And I had to kill her because it was like she was going to be a big nuisance on the patio. She was like, I had a great place and you just screwed it up, you jerk, right? It's interesting. Scientists will just say, well, that's their genetic programming and blah, blah, blah. It's like, well, maybe they're fully conscious, just like human beings. They're not having the same exact internet questions that we are having, but they have their own little ecosystem, their own world, and they want to live. Animals that are freaked out about us, you go to Reese's Monkey, you got a big sandwich in your hand, they'll run away for a little while until they realize, I could probably steal that out of his hand. Then they grab the whole Cheetos bag and take off, right? Something very powerful and very evident is going on. And I think man is so retarded, so slow in his thinking, that we can't hold enough information in our mind at one time to have an enlightened thought, a higher thought. To think that all these people like Elon Musk and Ray Kurzweil, God bless them, they think they're going to digitize the human brain into a computer and it's immediately going to start living and breathing in a computer. You have to understand, we are thousands of years from that ever even remotely occurring as a simulation of mankind. Just being able to digitize every electron in the brain and its physical structure, its cellular structure, and all of its nuances of synapse versus normal, suitcase mitosis cells, and we're so far away from that, it's ridiculous. And for them to tout that over and over again is ridiculous. Elon Musk, 2020, boy, he's going to digitize the brain. 2018, he was going to walk on Mars. How many times is this guy going to pull crap out of his ass and we're, going to let it go? It's ridiculous. The soul exists. It does. And because it exists, the only thing man's going to be able to do is create some form of artificial life and maybe trick the universe into giving it a soul. And then find a way to mechanically trap it, a Frankenstein formula. I don't think it'll ever happen. I don't think souls have a containment field. And I once heard I think I mentioned this one time in an Alien episode, there was a guy in Britain who thought, he's the guy that stood at a podium and talked like an alien. and it was the funniest thing you'd ever seen in your life. It's a cringe video on like level 11, okay? I don't know what you look up, alien presentation, guy talks like alien or something like that. I don't know. But in his presentation, he had this interesting other theory, which was, how many of you have seen the world drawn in a logo, and there's a grid around the earth, like a line grid around the earth? He put that up on his overhead, and he said that I don't know, it was the alien race. I think he said an alien race that had figured out how to trap all the souls on Earth. And that what we were supposed to be able to do is die and leave Earth, but this force field they put around Earth is holding us in. And so we ascend to God, bounce off the shield, and come back down and get reborn. Again, as if you're supposed to have a one-way ticket. God only lets you ride the roller coaster once. And then I guess at some point everyone's ridden the roller coaster and then it gets torn down. I don't know. Sounds weird to me. It's another weird assertion that I just haven't been able to shake. It's amazing how utterly creative people are with their pursuits of truth or the pursuits of making money through these weird presentations. I mean, it blows my mind that there's so many uninteresting people doing presentations on podiums to these big organizations. Really, no one's getting enlightened much. Maybe they get a history lesson. David Icke is very entertaining, I will say. That dude stitches things together better than anyone I have ever seen ever. And I've seen some pretty good connection episodes on the internet where people are doing that at a podium. Sometimes it's a personal experience and there's no one else you can get the information from. I met an alien. Let me tell you what it was like. Boom, 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 right? The other one I want to stress with you guys, because I think it will lead to a much more enlightened version of yourself, is I get comments on YouTube, and I appreciate virtually all of them, except for a couple people that get a little cranky, which we haven't had for years. And they will do what I call the nutshell theory. They're commenting on something very deep. It's in an episode. But they'll say, well, I just think it's this. It's just that. It's just that simple. Now, they could be right. I think what's tough reading that sort of comment is that they don't... Like, it would be better for me to read a comment that's got a simple epiphany at the end / solution to a dilemma we're trying to parse. And the person says, well, I was with you initially, 20 years before your show existed. I thought that too. And then I went down this path and I connected this, connected that. And you show a lineage of your thoughts going from perhaps where I am today to this other super epiphany. And the reasons why you made your decisions up and down, left and right, positive, negative, one thing's true, one thing's false. And that way we get to see your train of thought. And that's much more persuasive to me than someone saying, well, it's just we're on the back of a turtle. Boom, that's it. Another one I have seen for as long as the internet chatting has ever existed and for as long as texting has existed on cell phones, people will... you'll say something and you're having a conversation with someone and you will articulate something as you really spend some time on your text. You're really trying to explain a concept. It's not even that deep. It's not deep. It could be something like they're asking you like, what'd you do today? How's your day? And then you carefully explain a list of things, and then they ask you one follow-up question and then you elaborate on it. And then within seconds, you get this, what? And then you sit there and you think, oh, wait a minute. If we were talking live and I say something and your mind drifts for a second and you don't get what I'm saying, and then you're like, oh, I'm sorry. I was just thinking of something else. What'd you say again? Something about this, right? Totally get a live situation. But when you have a transcript of the conversation, it blows my mind how people will come back to a transcribed conversation, which you just scroll your finger down and you can read the previous parts of the conversation. Saying what with the question mark is almost an unforgivable faux pas of communicating with someone else. You owe them the respect to at least go back to the previous paragraph and read through it, and where you're getting confused, you say, what are you talking about with the watermelon and the dolphin again? I don't get it. And then at least it's like, okay, sorry, I should have clarified, should have made this easier. But just saying, what? I get this all the time. And I will tell you, it is very, very difficult for me. It doesn't happen a lot. Unfortunately, ladies, it only happens with you guys. I lose a tremendous amount of respect for that human being almost permanently, because I'm thinking, I mean, I divvy my time up and I police my time extremely carefully. Okay. So if I'm having a conversation with you, it's because I have cut that time out of my life. I'm not going to be creative. I'm not going to be pushing something forward in my life. I'm going to stop and have this information exchange. And I'm going to be using the slowest means possible, which is me typing, especially on my phone. You know, phone typing is just the worst invention on planet Earth, period. Okay. So when someone isn't going to put the intellectual minimums in to actually invest in the conversation and know what I'm saying, it's a pet peeve of mine. I hate it. And I'll just start not talking to that person anymore. Because when I talk to them, they're not paying attention, can't be burdened to fucking read what I say. Poof, you're gone. Because I just don't. Doesn't mean if I haven't talked to one of you listeners that has anything to do with that. I'm just really busy. The reason why I mentioned that little digression is that when we talk about these sorts of subjects where I think very few people have talked about it, you know. Now, deep inside philosophers, they definitely have. They've spent decades doing it. You know, there's certain specialized classes in colleges. They talk about it. I'm not in those places, so unfortunately I got to riff by myself and with you guys. But what's beautiful is that, you know, for those of you who are just joining the show, we have some of the most brilliant minds, and I am not exaggerating. I'm not blowing smoke. In the YouTubes, in the comments on the YouTube videos, and on our Facebook channel that's locked on Facebook. Just some great, usually a little deeper on YouTube because we're having a blast on Facebook. We just have a good time on Facebook. It's really fun. It's just a positive place to be because I'm a member of one of my buddy's conspiracy pages, and that thing's just like, you know, it's like ulcer medicine. It's to create ulcers, not to solve them, right? And I guess let me digress for a split second here. I got half an inch on this thing. I have friends that digest heavy-duty negative conspiracies all day long, and I will tell you that they are miserable people. Not miserable to be with, but they in themselves, they just don't understand why they're so negative, and they start to just, their energy starts to go down. It's like, I was there in 2005 and probably to 2010. Creating MK Ultra Radio really got me feeling much, much better as the world repaired itself. You know, this last 2 years has been tremendous if you're aware of what's going on in the world. So that's why I create Deep Thoughts Radio, and I try to stay away from things that are going to give you that emotion. Every once in a while we have to nut up and put some skin in the game, which is why I create some of those episodes. I'm going to do an episode on crisis actors this year. Not something I want to do. It's going to get shadow banned like crazy. I don't know how to title it any other way because to do it justice, it has to have that name. It does. So let me know what you think. Maybe give it some thought if it's a new idea. Maybe play this episode twice. You know, you've heard the concepts. Now go back and re-listen to it and put your own ideas down. Sift through it for a little while. What indications do you have that we have a soul or don't have a soul? If you don't believe in reincarnation, then please explain to me the one-way trip and how you're going to live forever in any state of being and be satisfied. And try not to just say, well, it's just heaven, man. For God to create a place where you could be forever and not be eventually in the Buddhist definition of heaven, which is nirvana, which is hell. It would be the greatest accomplishment of any supreme being to create an environment like that. That's what I believe. It'd be the toughest thing to ever do, ever. And, I don't know. I want to ride the roller coaster again, don't you? Be a different person. I think it'd be great. I think I've done it several times. Maybe I've done it infinitely. Who knows? You too. What is it to have been reincarnated almost infinite times and you don't know that it happened? How weird is that one, right? And then again, if you did remember, would you become a Q out of Star Trek where you want to commit suicide because you are sort of in a living loop of nirvana? You know what? I've done everything. I've been every single life force that could ever be, and I've done it all. Everything an amoeba could do, I've done it. Everything an ant can do, I've done it. Same old, eventually. It's funny, just at my age, late 40s, I think I've seen, especially being a screenwriter, I have to write the arc of man constantly, right? What does a woman do? What does a man do? What does a woman and a man do? How many heroes can you have? How many villains can you have? How many problems can you have? How many solutions can you have? And I'm starting to see sort of a real boxy world. And I'm not that old. And I haven't had that many experiences on Earth, to be honest. And I'm already seeing it. So imagine remembering all the previous lives you've had. I think the greatest gift we've had is we forget. And maybe the beautiful stress reliever is remembering after you die what you were and your conscious, but maybe it doesn't even matter. Like, does it matter that 100 years ago or 1,000 years ago you were Nefertiti or whatever? It doesn't really matter. Some religions think it does, and they try to, psychoanalyze you from all your previous sins and all that stuff. Well, whatever. Give it some thought and tell me what you think. I really want to, I'm trying to figure out a sort of a mechanism or a process that I can formalize with you guys such that I would say at the beginning of the episode, here's a crude title to say this, crude method of saying this, which would be, this is a homework episode, and in the end, like as you listen to the episode, you got some homework and then you go do it. Because I say homework at the end every once in a while. Maybe I should say it at the beginning. Sometimes I don't know. It's going to turn into one of those things where I think, we need to get some more brain cells in here and think about this thing. Some of the debates, usually we're posting a lot of memes on the Locked Facebook page, but some folks have the guts to write a paragraph about an experience, and then they just go, what do you guys think? Those are great. Those are gems, man. I really wish that Facebook would allow us to, within our page, to create categories. I mean, there's a discussion thing we can do, I think. I just don't think people would click over to see it. They just want to see the feed and go back to their coffee, right? But if we could say, okay, this is a meme, it goes in the meme feed if that's what you want to see. This is a discussion feed. Maybe I'll research that and we'll figure that out. There's still some technology to be developed, let me tell you. Anyhow, if you haven't been to deepthoughtsradio.com, that's where you can find all the video feeds. There's YouTube and BitChute currently. So you can find the audio feeds for the podcasts, Android, Mac, /Apple. It's all in there, easy to click and get into. There are essentially two social media outlets. One has conversation, one just has feeds. I've been told very specifically that Twitter is not being listened to anymore, read very much. Facebook, I'm sorry, it's a deep state organization. It is. Get in there. It's locked, so your employers and your family members, unless they become members, can't see what you're doing in there. So, I doubt they would have interest in joining in the first place, right? So get in there and have some fun. We have two ways to donate to the page, PayPal and Patreon. Then there's the link for the new Remastered Season 1. There's no ads on that because I don't have enough impressions to turn on monetization, so you just get in and get out super quick. So have some fun with that. But anyway, take care of yourself and someone else, and I'll see you in the next Deep Thoughts. Over and out.